Neymar may still have several years left at the top level of football, but already the Brazilian forward has shaken up the transfer market more than once during his career, from starting a bidding war while still a teenager at Santos to triggering a €222 million release clause that helped propel a wave of transfer market inflation. Although he's still just 28 years old, no player has cost more in cumulative transfer fees than he has. And yet, Neymar could be about to revolutionise the transfer market once again, and do so thanks to Andy Webster, a defender from Dundee, Scotland, whose cumulative transfer fees barely scratched $500,000. Now, this story starts in the 2005-06 season, when Andy Webster was one of the best players in a Hearts of Midlothian team that finished second in the Scottish Premier League and that won the Scottish Cup. But he didn't take part in their victory over Gretna in the final. Webster was left out because he was engaged in a contract dispute with the club, run at the time by the eccentric Russian-Lithuanian businessman Vladimir Romanov. Webster joined the Edinburgh-based club in 2001 and signed a contract extension in 2003 that had an end date of 2007. As such, he was due to complete the third year of that 4-year contract by the summer of 2006, and he wanted a new adventure. Unable to negotiate a move away via the usual channels, the defender turned to Article 17 of FIFA's transfer regulations, the article titled "Consequences of Terminating a Contract Without Just Cause." This article outlines what the cost is of unilaterally breaking a contract, and Webster decided this was actually a price worth paying. Article 17 was introduced into FIFA's regulations on the status and transfer of players in 2001, after the European Commission posited that football's rules on transfers didn't comply with EU law. A compromise was reached and new regulations were written up, now allowing players to unilaterally end a contract so long as they do so in the 15 days after the end of a season, and so long as they do so after having served at least 3 years of the contract if they signed it before the age of 28, or 2 years if they signed it after turning 28. This 2 or 3 year phase is what FIFA calls the protected period. It's technically still possible to breach a contract during this period, but the sanctions are much more severe and can bring lengthy bans. For Webster, who was 24 at the time, his contract's protected period ended in the summer of 2006. So he told Hearts that he was ending his deal and moving on. He was the first player to make use of Article 17 in this way, and he was moving south of the border to join Wigan. Now, there was still compensation to be paid, but it proved to be far less than the £4 million that Webster was valued at by Hearts at the time. When Article 17 is triggered, FIFA decides what amount of compensation should be paid, calculating it through a quite opaque formula. FIFA states that the amount of compensation will be based on the law of the country concerned, which can vary massively from country to country, with there even being differences between Scottish and English law, the specificity of sport, a legal term that provides wiggle room for all parties, the remuneration and other benefits due to the player under the existing contract, so basically the wages due to the player in the remaining years of his contract, the time remaining on the existing contract, up to a maximum of 5 years, and the fees and expenses paid or incurred by the former club, so any transfer fees paid to obtain the player and amortised over the term of the contract. Now, in the Webster case, FIFA ruled that Hearts should be paid by Webster and/or Wigan an amount of £625,000. Hearts, remember, valued the player at £4 million and challenged this at the Court of Arbitration for Sport, but this appeal didn't at all go to plan for the Scottish club, as the court actually reduced the compensation they were due even further to £150,000. And this was huge. Tony Higgins of the Players Union FIFPro said at the time, "My view has always been that this is the most significant case since the Jean-Marc Bosman ruling in 1995. The Webster case allows players, after a set period of time and if they so wish, to decide who their future employer will be. We now have a degree of certainty about what the value in question will be." And Higgins wasn't alone in thinking that Webster would set a precedent, and in thinking that moving clubs on a Webster would enter football parlance in the same way as moving on a Bosman refers to a player switching clubs for free upon completion of a contract. But Higgins and the other commentators were mistaken. There have been very few such cases since Webster made his move in 2006. In fact, the few cases that there have been only made this legal tool even more complicated and even more difficult to wield. Jonas Gutierrez used it to move from Real Mallorca to Newcastle in 2008. Real Mallorca demanded £12 million and were eventually awarded £5.2 million, although they had to pay half of this to the Argentine side Vélez Sarsfield, who also had 50% of the players' rights. Then there was the case of Matuzalem, a Brazilian player who switched from Shakhtar Donetsk to Real Zaragoza in 2007. The Ukrainian side wanted £25 million. FIFA set the compensation figure at £5.4 million. But it again went to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and on this occasion they upped the fee, forcing Real Zaragoza to pay £9.5 million. Now, this case proved that significant fees may still have to be paid for transfers executed through Article 17, and that Webster's original compensation was so cheap mostly because in his specific case he had just 1 year left on his contract, had arrived at Hearts for a small fee, and was earning relatively low wages. As FIFA put it, after the Court of Arbitration for Sport's Matuzalem verdict, the court confirms that Article 17 cannot be interpreted as a simple buyout clause for players for a predeterminable amount of compensation. This CAS decision in fact shows that the compensation payable in case of a unilateral breach of contract must be calculated in each case individually on the basis of the specific circumstances of the case concerned. So, what does this all mean for Neymar, PSG, and Barcelona? Well, there have been reports that Neymar and Barcelona are considering using Article 17 to bring the Brazilian back to Catalonia. Now, it's well known that Barcelona never wanted Neymar to leave when his release clause of just under £200 million was triggered by PSG in 2017, and that Lionel Messi desperately wants his friend back at the club. Messi even said after the 2019 summer transfer window that he wasn't sure if Barcelona did everything possible to bring Neymar back to the club. Now, there are long-established gentlemen's rules in football, and one of them seems to be for the top clubs to avoid resorting to loopholes such as this one. But if Barcelona really do want to do everything possible this time, then they could use the Andy Webster trick. They're already not on the best terms with PSG, so the view in the Camp Nou boardroom might be, why not? According to ESPN, Barcelona have already been discussing various scenarios with Belgian lawyer Wouter Lambrecht, who has previously worked at FIFA and at the European Clubs Association, so knows this legal minefield as well as is possible. The contract Neymar signed when he joined PSG in 2017 runs until 2022. He was below the age of 28 when he signed it, so the period he must wait before becoming eligible is 3 years, and that period will end this coming summer. He would be eligible to unilaterally break his contract within 15 days of the 2019-20 season ending, which poses problems of its own as the COVID-19 crisis has thrown the traditional football calendar completely out of whack. But the key here is that the fee would be enormous. There would be no previous example that comes close to the numbers involved with Neymar's wages or transfer history, so there's no way of knowing exactly how much it would cost Neymar and therefore Barcelona. And that is exactly the way that FIFA want it, remember. Yet experts discussing this situation believe that the fee could be in the region of £160 million. Whether or not that seems reasonable, the difference compared to Barcelona's negotiations with PSG last summer is that it's out of PSG's hands. The French club can no longer just put up a not for sale sign and be done with it. So this gives Barcelona and Neymar leverage, and what may ultimately happen is the following. Barcelona and Neymar have two options. With option 1, they can break the contract and pay whatever fee that FIFA calculates and that the Court of Arbitration for Sport then ratifies, because almost all of these cases eventually end up in the Swiss court. Or, with option 2, they can use option 1 as a threat to oblige PSG to take a seat at the negotiating table and to work out a normal transfer. If Barcelona can use either of these options to sign Neymar in 2020, then it would be an extraordinary and shocking transfer in the eyes of most. But Neymar's transfer history is already so multi-layered and continues so many twists and turns that it would almost be shocking if he didn't use the precedent of a retired Scottish defender who moved between Hearts and Wigan in 2006.